Welcome once again to the Kyle Report, and I'm your host, Chuck Lee. And this is a cold February 5th, 1996. And with me, as usual, is my rusty, trusty sidekick, Fred. I couldn't dig out of a snowbank for 2 weeks. Stafford.
Yes.
Glad to see you could make it tonight, Fred.
You bet.
And you know, speaking of snowbanks, Fred, we've had plenty of that stuff the last 2 weeks since we've been on the air here live.
Well, you certainly had a little cold weather, too.
Yeah, it's been pretty rough out there, and we're glad that you're tuning in tonight. And you know, Fred, I think one night it was 35 below there.
Right.
Of course, it might have been a little cold over by your place there. You're in the south side of town. But I even got a little bit of frostbite on my finger here, Fred, just touching it to some metal outside.
Yes.
I noticed now that spot's red there, and it's very dangerous out there in that kind of weather, Fred. We were just fortunate that we didn't have more loss of life than we did in the area, because these were killer temperatures over the last 2 weeks.
You're right.
Actually, over the last week was the roughest. Well, it looks like the toughest is over with now, Fred, and spring's right around the corner. And you know spring's almost ready when you see the Dairy Queen up there on Bracket getting ready to open up. Pretty soon they'll probably be shoveling the snow out and getting ready. Then you know spring's on its way, Fred, because they kind of usher in spring, and everybody gets to that Dairy Queen even when it's 30, 40 degrees outside.
Yes.
So, February 5th, Fred.
Yes.
You know, we had a lot of people calling in. They wanted to know what happened to our, what happened on this date in history.
They did.
And we've done that for now, what, 20, 25 years? We missed it a couple shows, and people got nervous. They started calling in wanting to know what's going on.
Yeah.
I want to know if Fred had changed the format. So we're back here on track now, and so February 5th, Fred.
Yes.
1862.
Yes.
Now, that's too far back for you, Fred. I'll give you an easier one. 1974, February 5th. Patricia Hearst is kidnapped by the Symbionese Liberation Army.
Yes.
What, Patricia Hearst, what was the name of the fortune that her father had?
The Hearst fortune.
That's right. Patricia Hearst is kidnapped by the SLA. Of course, for history buffs, you'll remember that she was videotaped robbing a bank with a machine gun, and supposedly she'd went over to the SLA communist forces that were having a little mini revolution there in California, and the whole thing ended up in a fiery shootout, and all the members of the SLA died. Of course, there was only about 10 members. They all died in a fire, and Patty Hearst was released, and she later on, Fred, she married either one of her bodyguards or a Secret Service agent, one or the other, but now she's a housewife somewhere in the Midwest. So she went from a gun-toting, left-wing, communist radical revolutionary to a housewife with a couple kids and a quiet lifestyle. So there you have it, Fred. Isn't it amazing how time changes things?
Yes, it certainly does.
All right, so that was the easy one now, Fred, and here's the hard one. 1736, February 5th. Methodism is introduced to the colonies when John Blank arrives in Georgia. Now, you probably learned this.
I don't think it was John Blank.
Well, what was his name?
I don't know.
All right, it was John Wesley.
John Wesley, yeah.
And he helped found the Methodist movement in the colonies, and the Wesleyan movement, and part of the Protestant movement in the United States. All right, Freddie. With us tonight, you know, these cold nights, we always need somebody to warm things up.
Yes.
And when we got this lady on the air, she really warms things up, Fred. People's ears start itching, and they get red ears, and their faces get red. But she tells it like it is, and of course, you know who I'm talking about.
Hillary Clinton.
No, Lorraine Lee. How you doing, Lorraine?
Well, I think I'm fine.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear that you're still in the pink of health and everything's okay. I know. Did you have a rough couple of weeks over there?
Oh, a little bit. We had the flu bug visit us.
Yeah, that thing's going around.
Yeah, it sure is.
I think I got a little touch of it the last 2 days, but I shook it off here, and
Uh-huh.
because you got to keep going.
Well, I imagine you probably called me tonight so I can give you my good wishes for your election tomorrow.
Well, thank you. I called. I had to call you about 2 minutes till 9 because we start getting calls, and then the phone's tied up, and we can't get through it all. So
Right.
I called you a couple minutes ahead of time.
Well, what's up?
Well, we want to find out your thoughts on. Well, I understand. I read. I guess there was an article in tonight's Leader Telegram that said that you're going to be interviewed in there next week.
Yeah, I think so.
under familiar faces. Is that the deal?
Yeah, I think they think I'm familiar.
Okay. Well, that'll be an interesting interview, and I'm sure that they'll treat you with kindness.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Now, so what's the hot issue down there at the county board? You're, of course, Lorraine Lee has been on the county board for quite a few years, Fred, and she was on the city council for several years, and now she's calling it quits after what? 20,
Well, I had 2
20,
years on
25?
the city council and 8 plus on the county board,
All right.
so I'm going to take a little rest for a while.
Well, what have you learned about county and city politics in the last 8 years?
Well, I've learned a lot. Some of it I wish I didn't know. But it's clunking away there. I wish there were more people that come out to work in our local government that had, constituents in mind instead of using it for a stepping stone for higher elections and for a good many different things, special interests and so on and so forth. When I went into politics, I went in solely to try to make some changes, and we did. We made quite a few, but, for so many years, the north side and the west side were just practically totally neglected.
Well, few people know that you helped open up that northwest side.
Well, I think our council did a great job on that. After all, we got together and got the loan pool started with the banks to help bring the competition for jobs to light here in Eau Claire and put in the spec buildings up there and put in the sewer and water on the west side up there, brought Gore in here and brought in Bradley Company, and
Now, you're not talking about it.
we did as much as we could do, but they didn't like our conservatism. I'm just amazed at how, when we're in such trouble tax-wise, that we can spend another $83,000 by putting an underpass for a bicycle trail when we're taking people's jobs because we can't afford their salaries, and our streets are in such disrepair, and then turn around and spend it on something like that, because I cannot see any economic development along those lines at all.
Well, the area you're talking about up on the northwest side is right past the center of care out in there. That was just basically a road running out that way towards Menards.
Right.
And that's all been opened up. There's all kinds it's almost full now with industry. We've got Hutchison building like crazy, and you're talking about Gore, the factory, not Al Gore, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we brought Al Gore in. Yeah, we brought Gore Company in here.
Okay.
But they're expanding, and I think that's good. Very good.
Well, those were tough times, Lorraine. I mean, the city was really down and out right after the Uniroyal closing, and it
was hard. It was really hard, and we tried our best. And all over the country, there's so much competition that you have to try to find some calling card here. And I really believe the council that I served on did a great job of that, and I hope that it continues. I am sure that there's efforts being made, that's for sure. I'm glad the Gore Company is expanding the way they are, because we certainly need the jobs in here. It just seems like every time we open up something else closes, but I guess that's the way it is all over the country.
Well, you guys...
I'm kind of concerned, I guess, about what's going on now with the Center of Care. I just cannot see getting mixed up in the assisted living. I think we should sell that land and let it be where it belongs in the public sector. Let them take care of it. We're going to go in the red again, and they're just going to open it up again, and we'll have to take another kick at the cat. They only won it by one vote. I wouldn't think they'd win another kick at the cat.
Now, how much land is left up there that the county owns anyway?
Oh gosh, I'm not really sure on that. But there's plenty out there. I mean, you know, and if we sold that land to someone in the private sector in business and let them put in assisted living, I just can't see it because they want to. The Veterans Affairs and Long-Term Care Committee are trying to get a commitment where they take care of the meals and take care of the laundry and all that, and they're crying all the time. They don't have enough help out there as it is. We're going to get into more staffing and more money spent out like that. I'd rather see them try to heal the waters out there as long as they won the vote and do something with center care and not put us in another mess.
Well, don't...
I just look at it this way, really and truly. That's what it's going to do, is involve the taxpayers some more, and they'll just... since I've been on the board, it's been at least twice, the tail end of a third time, when I first went on the first time, and then 2 times since to sell the center care, and...
Well, we still own it, but don't you... I feel like that they should stabilize the center of care and make it a top-notch facility. You don't get that... I understand there's one wing that doesn't have many people in it at all.
Well, they closed it down. They almost had to because they were just down so low in occupancy. But, you know, like last winter, I think occupancy, not this year now, of course, we can see that with the weather. But, you know, for the last couple of years, there hasn't been as much snow and ice where people are falling down, breaking hips and legs and everything else. And I think that there was low occupancy in a lot of the nursing homes as far as that goes. And I'm not knocking the care. It isn't that. It's just that we didn't have the occupancy out there, and I'd rather see them work on that now and let private sector take care of things like assisted living.
Well, we got a beautiful building out there, and they definitely need to make sure that that's humming along smoothly. And I know Fred's all for keeping the center of care, and of course that's already passed now, so we should live with it and make sure that it's top.
That's what I say. If they keep on with this, getting us into more expenditures and everything else with assisted living or whatever else they want to put out there, they're just going to bring it around for another kick at the cat. And one of these times, the deciding vote's going to go the other way, and the center of care will not be there.
Well, does an assisted living facility, does that look like it's something that can pay its own way? Is it?
Well, it's small apartments, you know. It's for people who need assistance to a certain degree but don't need a nursing home. But some of those people will need help with their medications and, laundry and things like that. But now, like over at Altoona, they have the meal on wheels or congregate sort of a meal situation put out there, but what they're looking for here for these out there at the center of care, the administrators trying to get it through that they're going to take care of the meals from the center of care, and I don't think they can do that. They're at personnel all the time trying to get more people and more people out there to work in the kitchens because they can't even keep the help there. They better take care of the residents out there and forget about getting into debt a little bit further here, or they're probably going to wish that they had.
Well, it'll probably take a few years for them to stabilize, but I think that if they really work at it, they can continue to...
Well, that's what I think they should be doing, is trying to stabilize. They won the vote out there, and the vote's passed. Now let's try and keep the center care operating, not put us in debt with another facility.
Well, I think it's something that's going to keep coming up, and
yeah, I'm afraid it is.
What do you think about all that, Fred? That center of care just seems to come up every few weeks. There's something going on with it. What do you think about it, Fred?
Well, I
think
think
a little
they
bit
should
different administration up there.
try and make the thing pay for itself.
Something that will just take on the center of care and forget about everything else.
Yeah.
Because that's where we need to work. We need to work out there, and like you say, it's a lovely facility. It's very, very clean.
Yeah.
I'm not knocking that. I never have. My mother was out there twice. My father was there when he died.
Well, besides the center of care, Lorraine, what else is hot on the burners? Anything exciting coming up on the county board?
I don't think there's going to be much now. It's so close to the election, and everything. Where the center care, I think, is the biggest issue we have right now. Of course, we're going to be voting on raises and a few things like that, too,
Well, I noticed that the budget for the county went up, 17-some%?
No.
What was the big problem that it went up such a big jump? Where did all the expenses come from?
Well, there's there's always a raise in the wages. You know, I think that's one of our biggest problems. I think that's we're at a freeze, you know, and wages don't freeze. We tried to put a freeze on, that didn't work, so now we have to cut some positions to allow for that.
Well, wages always has been the biggest expense.
Well, it is every place, I think.
Yeah.
You know, it's I don't know. I just still think there has to be a cap put on somewhere. Wages can only go so high with the taxpayers' money, but I'm maybe only one of the few on the board that think that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we'll see what the bully is now Wednesday night when we go voting on the administrator's raise.
Uh-huh.
I see they got it in our agenda that it looks like it's unanimous on personnel, which it wasn't. It was 3-2. So we'll see what the board says.
Well, what do you think, Fred? You got anything you want to ask Lorraine?
Offhand, no. I think that Lorraine has done a great job.
How are you doing with your campaign?
Oh,
Can you hear Fred, Lorraine?
No, I didn't.
Well, he says that he's really enjoyed you being on the boards, and he thinks you've done a great job, and he wishes you well in your semi-retirement.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to it, you know. I mean, there comes a time when it's time for someone else to take the reins, I guess, for a while anyway. I see you're the only one that has a primary in your district, right?
Yeah, this is the first time you haven't ran for what, at least four election cycles now, huh?
4 terms I've been elected,
Yeah.
plus the when I was appointed.
So it's
I've been on
kind
since 1987.
going to kind of be different for you not running for a seat this time.
Well, yes, it will, but we've got so many things to look forward to. We want to spend a little more time with our grandson and
Well, you know, it's
a little bit, you know.
it's been rough campaigning out there in this weather, I'll tell you.
Yeah, I guess so. I haven't had to do that the last few elections. I didn't have competition, but
You fall
I
down.
have gone out when it's been pretty doggone cold and knocked the doors, so I know what you guys are going through.
Uh-huh. Well, Lorraine, we want to thank you for allowing us to talk to you tonight, and I hope you got over your flu now and everything's okay with you, and continue to hang in there and fight the good fight up till it's time to retire.
Well, I've still got, you know, the neighborhood association here. We're going to pick up speed on that again now.
All right.
Well, I'll have a little more time to work on that than I had the last few years.
Well, it'll give you, now you'll have full time also to work on getting a mayor back in the city.
Well, who knows?
Fred will probably help you on that deal.
We have to wait till a few more people get disgusted, I guess.
Yeah.
It's getting there.
I think Fred wanted to say one more thing.
well, Lorraine, we're glad that you did serve, and I think you did a great job.
Thank you.
Okay, well, Lorraine, we'll let you get back to the Gulliver's Travels or whatever you're watching there.
All righty. Well, good luck tomorrow.
Okay, we'll see you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I didn't see anything in the paper tonight about tomorrow.
Well, the paper on Saturday, Fred, had a facsimile ballot of the spring primary election.
They did?
Yeah.
I didn't even see it.
Well, it's pretty small this time around. So anyway, tomorrow is election day, and we encourage everybody to go vote. Well, Fred, it's glad to always hear from Lorraine there. She's still chipper. There's even talking about having a draft Lorraine for county boards. I guess they're going to have write-ins on her. They want to write in her name down. Okay, Fred.
Yes.
Are you ready? 1943, February 6th. Now, you ought to remember this like it was yesterday. You're a young man in the Coast Guard, guarding New York Harbor from all the ruffians.
I was guarding New York Harbor in 43.
General Dwight D. Eisenhower is appointed to this office of the Allied Expeditionary Forces in North Africa.
Yes.
What was that office?
He was the commander-in-chief of the Army.
Allied Expeditionary Forces in North Africa, 1943. And of course, later on he He won the war, helped win the war over in Europe with Patton and the rest of them, and came back a hero and ran for president, served 2 terms, Dwight D. Eisenhower. And those were the kind of the quiet 50s, Fred.
Yeah.
For that 8 years. It was pretty peaceful in there except for that little bit of Korea there. Other than that, he had a pretty quiet time during his term. Of course, that's when Elvis and all them rose up and rock and roll and all that stuff, Fred.
Mm-hmm.
So that was 1943. Of course, on this date also, February 6th, 1964. You ought to remember this like it was yesterday, Fred. What happened down there in Cuba in 1964?
Castro took over Cuba.
Well, actually, he did that in about 1960, but the Castro turns off the water to the U.S. naval base in Guantanamo. Now, isn't that kind of an unusual situation, Fred? Here we got a communist nation down there called Cuba. It's been communist now for 36 years. And yet we got an American naval base right there on their land. And we pay rent to the Cuban government. And Cubans come in and work there. Communist Cubans come in and work on the base during the day and go back out at night. Isn't that amazing, Fred?
Yes.
It's been kind of a peculiar situation for 36 years. All right, Fred, well, I think we got a call on line 1, so we ought to take it there and see how the phones are working. Go ahead, caller, you're on the air.
How's it going tonight, Fred?
He wants to know how it's going, Fred.
All right.
Boy. Hey, I got a question about the Carson Park, renovation issue.
Carson Park, that you mean the baseball renovation, the baseball park and all that?
Thank you.
All right. What's the question?
Well, I was thinking, what you guys felt, what Freddie thought, maybe about a retractable roof on that thing. It could maybe be used year-round, with some AstroTurf and stuff too, artificial turf.
A retractable...
Right, yeah, something that could be used maybe year-round. They could...
kind of a dome, you mean?
Right, something similar to that.
What do you think about that, Fred, for the old ballpark out there?
Well, it might be a way to get some use out of it in the wintertime.
Yeah?
Well,
Well, something like that would cost millions. You'd have to start raising the money to...
yeah, I suppose. You could have bullfights and stuff in it, though.
I was wondering why they don't have... why they've never done that at Green Bay or Milwaukee for the baseball team or the Green Bay Packers. Why don't they have a dome for the Packers?
Yeah, that's a good point, but, the frozen tundra, I think they like to keep it frozen,
Yeah.
But,
I remember that game in '67.
that was a hell of a game. Yeah, that was very cool.
Yeah, that was back in the glory days of the Packers, but the Pack is back now, I guess.
Bet your bullets.
Yeah, they did pretty good. One victory away from the Super Bowl is a pretty good season for them.
You bet.
Of course, now with all this popularity and stuff, they'll probably lose half their team to wanting bigger salaries and free agents and all that stuff.
Yeah, well, you know how how the Packers they played in Milwaukee, and then they stopped doing that? I'm thinking with that dome, they might be able to pull the Pack up for a game down at Carson Park. Roll in the cars, 1 barrel per car.
Yeah?
What do you think about that?
Well, Fred, you're a Packers fan. I know you had your jacket. You wore that.
Well, actually, if I interrupt you, I think the other good thing, it's too bad that Greg Polnazik is gone, but it might be a good little intra-varsity squad scrimmage, the Pack versus the Golds. What do you think?
Yeah, that ought to be pretty good. Now, who's this Greg you're talking about? Was he a football player?
It's Greg Geen.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he was coach for the Golds.
Okay, well, thanks for calling in. Well, Fred, that there was some pretty good players here, but of course all the teams play out there at Carson Park, and I know they've had some trouble with the field out there, but there's a renovation program going on with Carson Park, and we urge people to give a donation to that so that because Carson Park has a long history, and we've got a famous player that started his career there, professional player Hank Aaron, and so that's kind of a shrine now and a tourist attraction.
Yes.
Well, what do you got there tonight, Fred, before we take another call?
Well, anonymous political observer tells the Wanderer, which is a Catholic lay paper from St. Paul, Baptist Canon hegemony, Steve Forbes has it would not only stimulate the radical liberal agenda to blame him for saying money, for having the money to spend several times what he has already called for news conferences and commentary on to destroy him as a viable candidate.
Who's that, Bob Dole?
Pat Buchanan.
Oh yeah. For those of you who don't know out there, Fred's really pushing Pat this year. He's got the hat. Hey, where'd you get that hat at anyway?
In Ames, Iowa.
All right. Of course, Fred and I were down at Ames, Iowa, and we were right hobnobbing with Pat Buchanan and Bob Dornan and Alan Keyes and Arlen Specter and the whole bunch of them. You were standing right next to the CNN guy down there, and you had some good-looking girl on both sides. You had reporters one from Milwaukee. I don't know, the other one's from the National Public Television Station. Mm-hmm. So Fred was in the big time down there. I don't know. Did you get any autographs or anything, Fred?
No.
But we were right in there with all those candidates, and most of them are still in there except Arlen Specter. He kind of hung it up for a while anyway. Suspended his campaign, I guess, until he gets back into some of these northern primaries, and he might come back in there. But I think we got another conversation going on in the other studio there. We got to kind of keep that down because it picks up on our microphones. All right, we'll take a call here on line 1. Go ahead, caller, you're on the air.
Oh, thanks for taking the call, Chuck.
All right.
Anyway, I was just wondering about, I fully agree with the lady and the gentleman that just had called in about renovating the Carson Park area. I mean, I think it'd be great to have it made up where we could use Carson Park in the winter, for not only a recreational facility there, but I mean, we could hold camps for like football or whatnot. Some kind of extracurricular activities or clinics in there also in the wintertime. I think it would be a great thing for Eau Claire. I mean, I guess the problem is just raising the funds.
Well, yeah, the Eau Claire, there's a movement on to get a civic center in the downtown area, a giant, actually an arena, and that's probably going to take some big tax dollars to get that off the ground. We've got some building going on out at the fairgrounds, and they're going to have a fairly large building out there, so you can just do so much. The Carson Park, I think, is kind of on the back burner now with most of the action shifting out to the fairgrounds area, and so it probably, I'm sure that this renovation is going to help the Carson Park, but I don't know if we'll see any great big arena or anything in that area unless they move the plants from the downtown area and take those out of there where there's not enough decent traffic patterns to get down in there and back out of there anyway. So
yeah, I just feel that Eau Claire needs something to draw the crowds back into the town. I mean, we seem to be losing a little of that fact that I mean, you know what I'm saying. You guys know what I'm saying.
Well, you notice the downtown area is coming back to life.
Yeah.
And that downtown association there, and I think his name is Jim Shue, who's the head of that. They've really worked hard to get those buildings back to life and get people back in there renting again. And now it's just probably 3 or 4 buildings that are empty down in there. And I think, because I've checked on a couple buildings myself for rent, and they're grabbing them up quick. So the downtown area is coming back, but I just don't know if it'll ever be able to handle a large arena in that area. It looks good on paper, but we're talking millions and millions. We're talking 30, 40 million bucks by the time they ever got around to building it.
Yeah. What do you think about that bike trail? I don't know about that. That's a lot of money that might could have been saved, put in other places.
Well, they got it going now. It's all the way through the city, and but there is some improvements that are still needed, and it just depends on how much you want to. Like Lorraine used to say, do you either want a Cadillac bike trail or a Ford Fairlane bike trail? And I guess her city council opted for a Ford Fairlane, but they got the thing going, and it's used quite a bit now in the summer. And eventually, this is going to be part of. It's going to link up, so it'll be. I don't know, in 10 years you'll probably be able to go 500 miles on the thing. But
yeah, I mean, my wife likes it a lot, but I mean, I don't know if I like it.
It's something for the city. The city needs all kinds of different recreation, and that's something for people to all use in the summertime. So I'm not really against a bike trail. I think it's got its pluses, but we just got to watch out that we just don't spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in just on a bike trail when there's other things in the city that need tending to. And you know, Eau Claire's coming out of a depression. When we lost Uniroyal, it plunged this city into depression. We're finally digging our way out of it now, and Hutchinson Technology is leading the way now to prosperous Eau Claire again, and now Eau Claire County is one of the fastest growing counties in the Midwest. So
I'd say that's pretty correct.
we're back on the track. I know you notice there's traffic even with this rough weather. I mean, there's traffic everywhere. This town is on the move again, and we want to keep it going that way, and we want to provide a quality of life that we've seen go down in other parts of the country, and so we're enjoying a low crime rate, and so we want to make sure that we have progressive growth and orderly growth, but we're on the move. What do you think about that, Fred? You think
I agree with you.
And I think that the people of the county and the city have done a good job getting us back on track.
Yeah, I got one more question for Fred. I'm
All right.
having some personal problems in my life now, and Fred, what do you think about divorce, Fred? My wife and I, we're not getting along too good, you know, these days, and I don't know, you know, I mean, I don't know, it's tough to talk about, but what do you think about getting a divorce, Fred? Should I pull her in there? You know, I mean, we've been to counseling a few times, and it just doesn't seem to be working, and I don't know.
I don't know where you went to counseling, but I think counseling could help. But I also, and I don't know what church you go to, but I would recommend you go to the prayer group that they have. They meet Monday nights in Immaculate Conception School Hall in the basement, and they have helped a lot of people who've come in there who've had problems maritally, and also got people jobs, sold houses, all kinds of things of that nature.
Yeah, I mean, I try, you know, I don't know, the wife, she just doesn't like to go, I guess, I don't know, you know, I try and make things work, and it's just not working along. Well, I don't know, Freddie, I guess I'm going to have to go talk to this.
You know, in the Bible, God does say that you should stay married, and He doesn't believe in divorce.
Yeah, you know, I look to the good Lord.
I've gone through divorce myself. I agree with Him. I don't believe that we should have divorce.
Yeah.
And after all, you married her in all probability to love, honor, obey, and serve until death do part. And I firmly believe in that.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, you know, it's tough, but I'm trying. Anyway, thanks for taking the call, guys.
Well, thanks for calling, caller. We hope that everything works out, Fred, because divorce doesn't help anybody, really. You know, it's the easy way out in the times we live in, but broken families don't help the children involved, and people are never quite the same, Fred, once they go through a divorce, and it's unfortunate.
What I got here?
Buchanan says he is the only pro-life candidate who can win nomination.
I believe that's true.
Well, he's a pretty good guy, Fred. Now, here's another guy, Malcolm Forbes.
Yes.
Now, that was Steve Forbes, the guy that's closing in on, as a matter of fact, on a poll on the news tonight said that Malcolm Forbes is leading Dole in New Hampshire, and at the best, Dole's got a dead heat with him. So they're really pouring the money in to win these two early primaries, New Hampshire and Iowa, and it's a dog and cat fight there right now. But Malcolm Forbes, Steve Forbes' dad, made this quote once. He said, "If you have a job without aggravations, you don't have a job." And of course, you know, he built an empire worth $300-400 million and gave it all to his son. And actually, it was bigger than that. But his son now is Steve's worth about $400 million. But Fred, you know, I got something here on gambling. This comes from the Family Research Institute out of Madison. You remember them, don't you? Mm-hmm. And they're talking about bills in the state legislature which would legalize video poker in taverns. Yeah. Of course, the tavern owners have always said that they need the video poker to compete with the casinos and the dog racing and basically mainly the casinos that the Indians are having, the Indians own all over the state. I'll tell you, Fred, this gambling is it's tough out there. People are talk about addictions, Fred. There's people who've robbed banks in Wisconsin just to get money to go gamble.
Yeah. One gal did.
And other people
I
have
caught her.
other people have had to embezzle from their jobs.
Two banks she stuck up.
And people have embezzled from their jobs, Fred, to go out and to get into this gambling thing. And Al Baldus is introducing a bill where he wants to phase out all gambling in the state of Wisconsin within 5 years. This is coming from a Democrat.
That may be a good idea.
Well, it'd be a sunset rule here. We'd get rid of it all in 5 years. But I'll tell you, it's tough out there, Fred. This gambling is an addiction just like heroin or cigarettes or alcohol. It gets a hold of you, and of course the taverns say they need it to survive. But you know, you go up north where people used to go up there where we used to have recreation like fishing and the hunting, and now you go up there and a lot of those taverns are closed now, and everybody's migrating. And
I haven't noticed that because I haven't gone
well,
too far up north.
a lot of the resorts up there are having a tough time, Fred, because people are migrating right to the gambling. They're coming in, they're blowing their money in the gambling casinos, and they're heading back out of the state. And a lot of that money is going into the Indian groups, and that revenue is not getting back out into the community as much as it could. And of course, with gambling, you always have mafia types and con artists and everything else, prostitution and drugs and all that shows up too, Fred. So it's sometimes the bad outweighs the good in this gambling business, and maybe Al Baldus is on track with this deal.
Yes.
Maybe it's just gone too far now. They need to back off a little bit. Well, I think they're signaling in there that we got a call on line 1, Freddie, so we better take it there. Go ahead, caller, you're on the air.
Yeah, I just got a comment on casinos you guys are talking about. I had a class here at the university with a couple of Native American professors, and they were just talking about that this is the worst thing that could have happened, this whole casino thing, to Indians in general. And I was just wondering, because I live in a community back home where there's a lot of Indians, and like you were saying, how the revenue is going in, but it's not going back out to the community. And that's kind of true because we have a lot of Indians in our area that they drive around in these brand new cars, and the places they live in could barely pass for a house. And I was just kind of wondering, what do you guys think what should happen about that casino business?
Yeah, thank you. Well, unfortunately, Fred, he's right there. There's a lot of money at the top, and a lot of money is skimmed off. And our good friend, the one that ran for Congress in '94, he's a Democrat and considered a liberal, but he did a Senate study on gambling in the state of Wisconsin, especially the casinos. And he said there's mafia influence involved, and the money was not getting down to the rank and file Indians, that it was being skimmed off. Leasing of machines for millions of dollars when the casinos could have bought these machines outright for thousands of dollars. Instead, they paid millions of dollars in leasing fees. And you know, when you lease something, you never own it.
Yes.
And so it's just, as usual, they've been taken advantage of, and the Indians have been taken advantage of for the last 150 years in this country. And once again, the money somewhat is getting down, Fred, but not anywhere near the revenues that are coming in. That money's not making it down to the rank and file Indians on the reservations, and there's still an awful lot of poverty and sickness and alcoholism within the Indian community. And those professors at the university are correct too, that it's just it's unfortunate. Now, if there's some way where they could get a hold of that money, an entity could get a hold of it, a neutral entity, to where that money could be used for health clinics and for the real needs.
They have one down in Black River Falls.
Yeah, some of the money is coming into the community, Fred, but not anywhere near what is being generated. A lot of it is being skimmed off one way or another. Well, Fred, we got another call coming in here, but first you got something there, a fact sheet on conservatives or what?
I do have Bob Dole's voting record. He had a 69% voting record in this year, and we also have Phil Graham in Texas. He has a 72% voting record, so that's three points higher. And we got Specter in Pennsylvania, and Specter has he has a 49% voting record.
Okay, Fred. Well, now we got we're on the internet now, Fred,
Yes.
for the Cow Report. So we want to tell the viewers out there that if they got a computer and they're hooked up through the internet or America Online or whatever, that our address is COWS at discover-net.net. That's COWS, no spaces. The sign at, which is on your computer typewriter, keyboard. Discover, DISCOVER, dash, net, N-E-T, no spaces in there so far. That's all lowercase letters. Then it's dot, N-E-T. So the whole thing there, cows at discover-net.net. No spaces, all small letters. So if you want to comment about any of our shows, or you want to discuss write an email to Fred or I about anything you want to talk about on the show, or comments, good or bad, we'll take those through the email address. Okay, I think we got a call on line 1 there, Roy. All right, go ahead, caller, you're on the air. Hello? Okay, we lost that one. They'll call back. All right, Freddie.
Yes.
Speaking about Forbes, of course, he's the one now that's going to be on the hot seat because he's moving up so fast in the polls. From a magazine called Media Bypass, it says Citizens for Tax Justice. That's a group that reports that the 17% flat tax proposed by Republican presidential candidate Malcolm Steve Forbes, in other words, Malcolm Jr., would cut his personal tax bill by more than half. Based on Forbes' reported earnings of $1.6 million a year, the Citizens for Tax Justice estimate his tax bill would fall from 20.5% down to 9.9%, a cut of $174,000 a year. Now, don't think I'm for bigger taxes, because I'm not. I simply want you to know what these presidential wannabes don't. This is a guy named Troy Underhill speaking. He says, let's face it, in some ways, Steve's probably helped Media Bypass being able to recruit Mr. James Norman, and for that we say thanks, Steve. And by the way, Steve, when you're ready, I think the publisher will allow reprints of Norman's work to grace the pages of Forbes, providing you print our 800 number. I think this guy, James Norman, used to write for Steve Forbes, and they fired him over an article that was unflattering to the Clintons, and the Media Bypass magazine picked it up. But it sounds like this flat tax is going to help Steve Forbes, Fred.
Yes.
And of course, you know, the guy that was the former head of Housing, Urban and Development, Jack Kemp, just made a report on overhauling the tax system in this country, and there's quite some very good recommendations in that area. So hopefully they're going to, hopefully now they're going to carry those out.
Unfortunately, you take David Rockefeller in '73. He was invited in to testify and why he didn't pay any federal income tax, and he made a $26+ million income the year before.
That was a pretty good deal. Okay, they're on the screen now.
He'd have to pay something.
There on the screen now is our email address. If you've got some kind of online service, or if you belong to DiscoverNet or America Online or CompuServe or Prodigy or any of those, you can get right on there and give us your comments. And I think even if you're on Chippewa Valley Freenet, you can use their email system to write to COWS, C-O-W-S. Okay, go ahead, caller. You're on the air.
Chuck.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, I've got a little problem with the conservatives in this country. I've noticed, it seems to me that a lot of the jobs are being lost. People seem to be having a harder time of making it from paycheck to paycheck. And I see Thompson, and I hear Gingrich hollering about cutting the welfare and doing this and doing that. And well, these guys are sitting down to $1,000 plate dinners. And they go to their congressional cafeteria and they sit and get a nice meal for about $4 or $5. That probably costs 15 or 20 in the real world, and the taxpayers picking up the difference. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I ran for Congress in '94, and I fought all those special perks and special privileges at the Congress and executive branch and the legislative and judiciary. All of them, they're treated like kings and queens out there in Washington, and they kind of almost get out of touch with reality of what's going on in the rest of the country, and pass bad legislation that affects us, but it doesn't seem to affect them. And they have half-hearted attempts at trying to reel in some of these special perks, but it always gets sidelined.
Well, what really bothers me is the fact that they, right now, seem to be beating up on people that can't fight back. And I'd like to ask a lot of your audience who are on Social Security and Medicare, you know, I think about March of next year, they're going to start beating up on them because they're already starting to bring that up, which used to be a sacred cow that any politician would never touch. Now they're starting to bring it up.
Well, the reason they're starting to bring it up is because you got 70 million baby boomers, and the first batch of them now is hitting 50 years old, and they're worried that in 15 years there's not going to be enough for everybody. But nobody's getting rich off Social Security. My mother gets about $300 a month. It's not.
I know that, and I'm not saying that they should cut it or anything. What I'm saying is that we've got to watch these guys because I think they're going to come after them. And I also think that a lot of these politicians, you know, they've got their 100% paid medical insurance for about $105 a month. They've got
multi-million-dollar retirement programs.
Exactly, all of this. And Democrat, Republican alike, if you want the truth, I don't think any of them are any good.
Once
really
again,
don't. They're all out to feather their own bed.
Well, it's a good old boys and girls network now. And,
right. And I think Ronald Reagan started all when he fired the backhoe workers back in '81.
Well, I've said that on this program for years, that was the beginning of the end of the union movement. But I think
that's right. And we got to have a strong union.
I think there's a little bit of life coming back into the unions now because people are being hired again and the factories are starting to hum. So after they get the jobs back, then they start thinking about security, and sometimes the union is the only way to keep that security.
Well, I hope the unions get strong, because I'm going to tell you something. In the last couple of weeks, I've had big problems with Ameritech and AT&T downsizing. You ever call to try to get the equipment service from them boys? You forget it. You sit on the phone for an hour at a time while some computer talks to you and tell you to push this button, push that button. Well, this downsizing is no good.
Well, the computers are taking over a lot of stuff, and you know, a computer can sit there and work 24 hours a day and doesn't eat and takes up electricity, but never gets sick, never comes in to work with a hangover, and so whatever can be computerized is being computerized, especially in a business that's fast changing like the phone business. They're going to be downsizing quite a bit over the next 10 years.
Well, the thing of it is now MCI and the rest of them have got the go-ahead that in the near future they can also provide local service. So I think Ameritech and AT&T better sit up and take a look at, maybe I'd like to talk to a human being instead of a computer.
Another thing is now you're getting into where the phone companies will be giving service. You'll be able to get movies by calling up your phone company instead of watching just what Time Warner wants to show you on their cable system. You'll be able to plug in the cable systems through your phone lines.
Well, I look at it this way. The day I get too lazy to go down to the local convenience store and pick up a movie, they better bury me, because to me that's getting to be the epitome of laziness. You know, when you don't want to get out, you just want to sit at home and push a few buttons on your computer or your television remote and sit back and watch the boob tube, and you know, it's just, to me, it's just another way of the Communist Manifesto coming about.
Well, things are tough out there for the older generation, and I know it's people are just trying to protect what they've got now, because, like I say, even with my mother, Fred's not getting rich off Social Security. He's hoping that it'll at least pay the bills during his golden years here, and it probably won't. With inflation and stuff, Fred is losing ground.
Well, I don't have anything against people collecting Social Security. What I'm saying is that if we allow the Congress and Newt Gingrich and Tommy Thompson to keep going after the poor people on welfare, next they're going to come after the poor people on Social Security.
Yeah, well, we got to keep our vigilance up and make sure that there's always some kind of netting there to catch the people that fall out of those jobs and they're too old. I know. I'll tell you, they've got a law that when you hit 40, you can't be discriminated against when you go out looking for a job. But there's discrimination out there.
Well, you better believe it.
When you're in your 40s and 50s and 60s, it's tough.
There's all kinds of discrimination out there, and you know, as more and more young people are losing their jobs with like Ameritech, AT&T, you name it, banks. Look at these banks; they're making record profits in the last 2 and 3 years, and hardly any of their employees have gotten a raise. Now, what gives? Is this greedy American corporations, or what? Is it politics giving them the go-ahead to do this kind of stuff?
The bottom line.
What's going on?
The bottom line is profits for those people that buy the shares, and they want to keep the profit margins high. And I think that's one of the reasons why they had to bust unions in the early 80s, was to start lowering the wage scales so that they could compete on a worldwide basis. And actually, the bottom line, the companies made record money, but the average worker, his wages with inflation has actually gone down over the last 10 years.
That's right.
And
it's going to keep going down until something is done. I think what we need in this country is possibly a third party.
Anything less than $10 an hour now is you're under the poverty level.
That's right.
And
$9.20 an hour just to keep a roof over your head. That's the government's own figure that they shot out a few months.
It takes about $10 just to pay the bills when you're paying $300-400 for rent and utilities and electricity and a phone bill, and the $50 that Time Warner wants just to have a little bit of entertainment at night and food and everything. It takes clearing about $400 a week.
Yep, and I'll tell you something else. You know, if something isn't done soon, I'm afraid there's going to be some kind of
well, they just got to get blow the dust off those old union banners and start organizing again, like Hoffa and them did back in the 30s.
You're right. That's exactly right.
Well, we got to move on. Freddie here's getting itching to tell us something, so we appreciate your calling in and your thoughts and your views, and continue to watch.
All right.
Thanks a lot.
Talking about Steve Forbes, here's an article, is not pro-life. He also is a pro-New Worlder.
Well, Fred, on some things he's conservative and some things he's liberal, and it seems to be that way with a lot of people. But anyway, Fred, tomorrow's the elections. We urge everybody to go out and vote. February 6th, Tuesday, is the judicial and county offices. And who are you backing this time around for the judge, Fred? This is for the State of Wisconsin Justice of the Supreme Court, Fred. There's a vacancy in the state Supreme Court.
Yes.
And there's 7 people running.
Yes.
Do you know any of them? You know anything about any of them?
Well, I liked what's his name who I can't think of his name now, from over on the eastern part of and he's up north a bit.
Well, one guy's
Crooks, is it?
One guy's name is Shudson, another is Fine, another is Buggy, or Bugey.
Yeah.
B-U-G-G-E, another's Miller, Froelich, Wiedemeyer, and Crooks.
Yeah, Crooks. And Wiedemeyer, what's his name? The other one there you had who
Bugey?
was a congressman.
Oh, Fine?
No, he was up
Miller?
down toward the bottom.
Froelich?
Yes.
He was
a good congressman. And he is pro-life. Is not afraid to say so.
Mm-hmm. Well, Freddie, the polls open tomorrow at what time they usually open? 7 or 8?
Well,
they close at 8 p.m.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, the 7 a.m. in the city and out in the outlying areas. Some open as late as 9, and some are open between 7 and 9. They start opening up, Fred. And of course, there's not much going on this time around.
Well, you're running.
Yeah, I'm running for county board in District 17. We're the only ones, one of the few primaries in the state. I think only 2% of the county board seats that are up for election in the whole state of Wisconsin have primaries, which figures out to, what, 30 or 40 primaries statewide. So it's slim pickings for people that are looking for a primary this time. Now, Freddie, we got about 3 minutes left, and what do you got there? Have you got any announcements for any meetings coming up or anything?
Not offhand.
Knights of Columbus or?
Knights of Columbus will be meeting next Tuesday night in Knights of Columbus Hall on Thomas Drive.
Okay, is there anything important going on down there, or just an organizational meeting, or?
Just an organizational meeting.
All right.
Clinton appointees push homosexuality, and here is something from Jerry Falwell that he brings out some of the things that they've been doing. Hazel O'Leary has made it mandatory for employees to complete a 3-hour AIDS training session called Walking the Talk. And Attorney General Janet Reno, who is homosexual, will recognize sexual orientation, homosexuality, then granting nearby clearance.
Okay, Fred, we better take one more call, and then we're going to just about get out of here. Go ahead, caller, you're on the air.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that article about Steve Gunderson in the Sunday paper.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't get to read too much of it, but what about him possibly running?
Yeah, what do you think about that?
Well, I said it right here just a couple of days after the 94 election, that even though Steve said he wasn't going to run, that there'd be a draft movement and he possibly would get back in the race, and I've kind of felt deep down inside that he would run again, and now especially with him being in line to be the chairman of this committee. But unfortunately, I also have said the Republicans, when they get in, have a tough time governing. They're good as a minority, but when they get in the majority, they kind of stumble and they don't know how to rule and reign. So Steve might be in the minority again if he runs re-election. He might be just another member of the committee again, because it could very well, the Democrats could take over the Congress. So I guess that's our final thoughts, Fred, and I'm going to leave everybody with this thought. Thomas Edison said, "I never did a day's work in my life. It was all fun."
Yeah, and National Public Radio commentator calls Christian belief crap.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and we'll see you 2 weeks right here on the Cow Report. Don't forget to vote tomorrow. Your polls start opening at 7 o'clock within the city limits. And we'll see you right here live on the Cow Report in 2 weeks. Adios, and thanks to Roy Rogers Hoff, our engineer. Welcome once again to the Cow Report, and I'm your host, Chuck Lee, and this is a beautiful February 19th, 1996, in beautiful semi-downtown Eau Claire. And with me, as usual, is my rusty, trusty sidekick, Fred Stafford. Glad to see you could make it tonight, Fred.
Right. Yes.
Good deal there, Freddie. Glad to see you could make it. Fred Stafford.
Hi.
Okay, Freddie. Well, we got a lot to talk about, I'm sure. Well, you know, since we were on the air last time, we had a local primary here. You know,